Good evening, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the country get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. This will especially apply tonight. Also, as usual, we are soliciting questions and comments from you via Twitter at Mason Roundtable and or with the hashtag TMR episode 15, TMR episode 15. As for introductions, my name is John Ruark. I'm the past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia, and I'm currently the Lodge Education Officer and Chaplain. I will hand it off to Jason.
Thanks, John. I'm Jason Richards. I'm the Senior Deacon of Acacia Lodge number 16 and the writer for the blog The 2-Foot Ruler, Masonry in Plain Language.
Okay, Juan?
Good evening. My name is Juan Sepulveda, and I am a member of Eola Lodge number 207 in Orlando, Florida, and my podcast is The Winding Stairs.
Okay, Nick?
Hi, my name is Nick Johnson. I'm a past master of Corinthian Lodge number 67 in Big Time Farmington. I got a blog, millennialfreemason.com.
Nice. And Robert?
Brother Robert Johnson, Senior Warden, Walking Lodge number 78, host of the Whence Came You podcast.
Very good show. Okay, so topics tonight before we get in. Masonic news. We forgot to mention last week about the upcoming Celebrating the Craft Scottish Rite webcast, and
it's no longer upcoming.
Yeah, that's true. It was upcoming then. It's in the past now. Did you guys watch it? What'd you think? Impressions?
Yeah.
I watched a lot of it, but not all of it.
Okay, what did you think?
It's better than last year, and I think it gets better every year. It really has a flavor of the old telethons, so there's a little bit of nostalgia there for me. I used to watch the Jerry Lewis telethon growing up, so it kind of had a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, Johnson versus Johnson. You win. You're past master. Go.
God, that's terrible. No, I was just going to ask Juan if he was a tall seater, because the telethon, that's MDA, that's the Jerry, whatever his name was.
Jerry Lewis.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm not.
Tall seaters are on there all the time. Yeah, so there you go. Pass it off to Robert, since my comment was completely useless.
No, I know where Nick was going. All Cedars of Lebanon were doing that charity long before Jerry Lewis. Nothing against Lewis. I thought the telethon was really good last year. Pretty good. I actually took the day off to watch it because I didn't know what it was going to be, and I just wanted to hang out and check it out. So I sat and watched it, streamed it from my iPad to the TV for like 5 hours, drove my whole house nuts. It was interesting. This last year, it really did bump up a little bit, I think, in the quality. I liked the question and answers, like kind of trivia they were doing, even though...
Yeah, that was cool.
Some of the mispronunciations were pretty good. Last year, the dude who hosted that History Channel show, was it? I can't remember what it was, History's Mysteries or something. He hosted it, or maybe that was the year before. But the mispronunciation was awesome when he said Job's daughters. Like the lady immediately like, no, it's Job's daughters. But it was it's been getting better.
Okay. Good. I think a comment that Juan had put on his Facebook page, and it's kind of true, is I wish there was a way that you could stream it through like Chromecast or something.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
it's great that we have a webcast on that scale for a Masonic, charity and fundraising event. So that's cool that they're stepping into the 21st century. But let's go even further and try to do it so it's streamable. It's hey, even a hangout on air would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, we all considered, right? We were all talking to each other, and we actually considered just screen sharing it and going live and making comments, but...
There's always next year.
Yeah.
Then our consciences and everything else got the better of us.
Yeah.
Here's some interesting. Oh, go ahead, Juan.
No, I was gonna say that I figured out how to actually Chromecast it, but it was like 5 minutes before, so it was no good.
There's always next year. There was an interesting bit of Masonic news that Ruark and I stumbled on this last week. It's a little bit old. It's from March, but in Omaha, Nebraska, where I traveled a couple months ago, they've got a new lodge, which is Albert Pike Lodge number 333, which is interesting as it has the authority from the Omaha Scottish Rite to confer the 14th and one of the other Scottish Rite degrees.
The 4 and the 14th. Yep.
4 and the 14th.
That's pretty cool.
Well, the thing is, though, if you look at the other half of it, though, I was listening to the podcast for that, and kind of the funny thing is, it almost felt like you could call it the Rotary Lodge number 333, because, it's meets during noon, it's aimed at young professionals, and this is literally how they're, and so I'm sitting there going, the 4 and the 14th part, awesome. That is really freaking cool. But then all of a sudden it's like, and it'll meet during lunch, and it'll be filled with professionals, and it's the Rotary. I mean Masonry.
I was going to say it'll meet during lunch when none of the professionals can get off of work to come. I think we call those daylight lodges here in Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting idea, just having a lodge that fulfills both the Blue Lodge obligation inside of Masonry and ventures off into some of the appendant bodies. I think it's a cool idea.
It is definitely cool, especially I like the idea of conferring the 4 and 14th in the southern jurisdiction in that lodge. I think those 2 degrees are... The 14th is my favorite.
Very cool.
Well, in South Australia, just to... I'll be real quick, but in South Australia there's a lodge called Lodge Copernicus, and it holds 3 charters. It holds a charter from the Grand Lodge of South Australia Northern Territory. It has a charter from the Royal Arch Grand Chapter of South Australia, and it also has a charter from the Mark Lodge in South Australia. So it's actually
like 3 lodges?
It's one lodge that essentially what they've done is they've merged all the charters into one document, or I guess something like that. So if you look on my blog, millennialfreemason.com, and you look up Lodge Copernicus, apparently, and I was chatting with the guy from there, it allows you to be able to take every single degree of the ancient craft in just one single body. It meets one night. You're not having to sit there and go, I want to be a Royal Arch, but that's Monday, and I meet on Tuesday. It's all in one.
Cool.
Yeah, so.
All right.
That's here, but.
Well, let's dive into our topic tonight. Should be a special one that you've been asking for, which is, let's talk about esoterics, right? Let's dig into the details. And boy, that's a loaded topic right there. And so what we've kind of done is try to take a very broad brush. This is a 101. This is the things that we've dabbled with along the way and things that we've found. And so, without further ado, can you guys see that?
Yeah, you're good.
Yay! Technology works. 101. So, before we get into esoterics, well, let's define what does the term mean. What is esoteric? This is cut and paste out of Wikipedia, but it's basically ideas or concepts preserved or understood by a small group of people, either initiated or just have a really weird interest. So, if you've been initiated into Freemasonry, you have esoteric knowledge, right? That you have knowledge that no one else knows that has not been initiated into the fraternity. Or if you have a very awkward skill that no one else has and you're the only one who knows how to do it, you have esoteric knowledge. If you're a Reddit master, then you have esoteric knowledge. But it also applies in this context to even deeper philosophical meanings as well, right? It's things like mysticism. Jason, did you want to talk about kind of what your knowledge and experience of learning about what is this esoteric mysticism all about?
Sure. Actually, when you look at mysticism, that word in and of itself comes from the Greek, and I don't have a recollection of what the actual Greek word is, but it means hidden. So it goes along with the idea of something that is hidden to most everyone except for a very select few people. And when you look at mysticism, I think it's important to define it a little bit, just because a lot of people have preconceptions of what esotericism and what mysticism is. When we actually look at the practices of mystics and people who study esoteric philosophy, we realize it's not about demonology. It's not anything inherently evil or maleficent or instead, it's the idea of trying to know God as best you can, and that it's a focus on the transformative presence of God in your life, and the idea that very, very few people, at least on this earth, have the ability to comprehend, truly, who God is and what He is, and it's the idea of working your entire life to try to know God as best as you can as a human.
Yeah, and that does relate closely to the term gnosis or Gnosticism, right? And with a G, and that really means knowing, right? It's the gnosis. It's knowing God. It's knowing and experiencing and being one with a supreme being. So that's you'll see that as a common theme through a lot of these philosophies is taking a Neoplatonic approach, which we may talk about tonight, about having a oneness with the Creator.
It ties into Masonry really well, real quick, John, because you can't be a brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God without having some conception of what God is, who God is, and what force for good God is in your own life.
Very good. Also, the opposite of esoteric is exoteric. Basically, it means things that you can experience without having to go through the initiatic process, without having to learn or have some hidden knowledge. It's observable from the outside. So one way to look at it is exoteric Freemasonry. What we're doing here is exoteric Freemasonry, that we're not revealing any of our secrets, but we are sharing with you what we can share, what that is common knowledge or that can be, shown. And so that's just kind of the opposite definition of esoteric, and it's worth kind of explaining. With that, let's go right into one of many examples of esoteric philosophies. Now, I've read a couple books by and seen a couple great YouTube videos from W. Kirk McNulty, who's written a couple of books on how Freemasonry evolved from the Hermetic Kabbalistic traditions of the Renaissance. So what is Hermeticism? Well, obviously, like I said there, it influenced the Reformation and self-knowledge of God, right? So at the time before the Renaissance, there was a lot of unidirectional, one-way church doctrine, church dogma, and as the Enlightenment came around, people were starting to discover, self-knowledge and do more of the scientific method and apply these philosophical principles to their lives directly. And so it teaches that there's an absolute God, there's a oneness, sometimes they call it the one, and we all in the entire universe participate in that being. So it's kind of a high-level concept. That's all we're trying to do here is just kind of cover what it is. But does anyone have anything to add to that based on what they've read or some of their background that they've experienced?
Well, it emerged supposedly about the same time as early Christianity, and some sources categorize it as this intellectualized pagan thought. It's true that it's very heavily monotheistic, and it's the idea that God, exists as, he transcends the universe. He's not a physical part of it. However, everyone on Earth, has a part to play in knowing God and exploring who God is.
Right. It's all part of every person is a divine part of the idea of, the one or the God.
Cool. Anything anyone else wants to add to that?
Well, I wanted to mention regarding these different philosophies and religions and points of views, the way that I look at them today is very different than the way that in my family and my community attempted to present it to me as. I grew up in a very Christian household, and my community in a majority was Christian. So there was a very, very strong feeling that this is, if it's not Christian, is occult or is pagan or is away from us. So the way that I look at it today is very far from that. I see it as these are different disciplines, different religions, and different ways of trying to explain something that essentially is almost inexplicable. It's something that we're trying to wrap our minds around, something that is so difficult to completely understand, and we're doing it under our own not restrictions, but our own limitations. We understand things based on what previous things that we've learned. So I see these as ways of trying to explain something that's very difficult to explain with a system that can be easily assimilated. So
Right, and I think you bring up a good point, Juan, that I read a quote somewhere, and I'm going to horribly paraphrase it and basically say that a wise person can consider other opinions without having to accept it as fact.
Mhm.
And so these are influences of Freemasonry and the ritual and the wisdom and the knowledge therein, but you don't have to take it all. You don't have to take it at face value. You can take none of it, and that's the beauty of it. Is
It's a buffet.
it's a buffet. It gives you something to think about, and you can maybe learn something. You can maybe apply it to your own religion, and that's the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next topic on here is the Kabbalah, and so I will let Robert Johnson jump into this one because he did a great job covering that on this week's Whence Came You podcast. So why don't you kick things off there, buddy?
Oh man, I am no expert on the Kabbalah at all, so I will preface anything I say with that. Don't go around saying Robert Johnson said this.
Rabbi Johnson said.
Rabbi Johnson.
Wait, I heard that Robert Johnson said he's an expert in the Kabbalah.
I heard that too.
Sweet.
So basically, what you have, and this is no Masonic type secret. This is basic stuff that you can read in any a book like the Kabbalah, or you can dive further into a book called the Zohar, which really focuses on the emblem you see here of the what's known as a tree of life, I guess. It's got 10 circles that represent different, lots of different things. They can represent realms. I've seen places represent them as. I've even seen chakras represented all over it, but ideally what it is, the Zohar talks about the highest level there is, this emanation of God, and the bottom, where the gentleman is actually holding it, is a realm that we all live in, and his light has to travel through all these different emanations or filters, because by the time, if we were to experience it directly, we would die. And so each one of these things not only filters the light, but also fulfills a sort of quality, like a feminine side, a masculine side, knowledge versus discipline, and all these different things are represented in very many ways. And that's just the smallest part of the Kabbalah. And there you can see. You have the Kether crown. You have got all these different ways that you can travel through it. And the kingdom at the bottom is where I'm gonna not get into that. But you know what? Juan knows a lot about the Kabbalah also.
I love it. Well, I can tell you that it is one of the things that I have been spending some time lately, and just like Robert, I'm an expert at it. So, the way that I look at it, it reminds me a lot of a conversation that I had with a great friend of mine, who is he's a Jesuit, and the way that he explained his experience in the Society of Jesus is that during the day he is having all these different experiences, and at night he reflects upon those experiences and tries to understand where within that day and in the events of the day did he see God. And based on what I thought it was a really cool thing, not only because it gave him awareness of where, and the way that he described it I thought was very beautiful. He said, I saw God in the smile that stranger gave me, and I saw God in the way that man treated his kid in public. And he tries to remember all these things and then attempts to make a plan for the following day, try to show God through his actions in emulating these different things. Well, how does that relate to Kabbalah? And the different emanations are those different qualities through which you can experience God.
Yeah.
So that part of it fascinates me. I'm sorry?
Robert?
Oh, I just said that was Juan did a very nice explanation of what I tried to say.
No, and the Kabbalah, it really is a very common philosophical reference in Masonry, because Masonry does cover lots of topics in its rituals, right?
In
And so,
the Scottish Rite.
especially in the Scottish Rite, but I'd say
Really, I haven't seen much of it in the Blue Lodge, outside of some things that.
well, you're not looking hard enough, Robert.
Well,
I'm okay with not seeing much of it. I'll go on record by saying that.
No, I've actually seen at least 2 or 3 research papers that show kind of the parallels.
I just wrote one, John.
Well, but you said it's only Scottish, right?
Yeah, you're right.
But to that point, I mean, it's what I like about it. The engineer in me likes it because it's a system, right? It shows an order to things. It shows a wrath and a wisdom, a kindness and a justice. It's really got a nice balance to it, and it's really about the different aspects of God and the different stylizations of creation. And so it's really a really neat system to dive into. I mean, there's a million things we could go into beyond it. Is there anything anyone else wants to add before we go to the next one?
I want to tell you about you liking it because of the engineering part of it. I had been listening to a rabbi talking about the system of Kabbalah and referring to the different teachings as technologies.
Wow.
So that was the word that he was using, applying this technology.
The Zohar explains all of it in a technical aspect and was written a ridiculously long time ago, and so that's when I read it and I go, what?
Nice.
Oh.
Very nice.
It's amazing.
I got to get some of that. All right. Let's see. Rosicrucianism.
I was going to give you guys a spit take. When you...
Yo. So that is a spin-off. So it was written in kind of the Middle Ages, the 1300s or so, and it really is based on the Christian faith. That's why it has the Rosicrucianism in the name and the title, written by gentlemen or group of gentlemen under the pseudonym of Christian Rosencreutz, whose name translates to the Rosy Cross, the Christian Rosy Cross.
Yep.
And just the skimming that I've done about it is really kind of neat, because really it's taking Christianity and trying to directly apply it in your time here on Earth. And really, what I think the big summary that I got of some of the things that I've read is divine altruism, being as generous as humanly possible and then some. They talk about in some of the Fama Fraternatus, that the actual text that was written by this Christian Rosicrucian, talks about how the candidates for Rosicrucianism, the very first ones, had to become doctors and had to work for at least like 15 or 20 years as doctors and give entirely free medical care. It's accept no payment, and the only thing they could do is basically accept food and accept shelter, and they would just go town to town. And
who else demanded that his people do that?
yeah, right. It sounds very familiar. But it's really kind of a neat concept. It's kind of one of those, wow, I don't know if I could ever go all in like that, but it's really a really noble concept, right?
It's that walk the walk, talk the talk. I mean, so many of us, we can look at these kind of things and we study them all day long, but I don't know anybody. Well, I know 2 people in my entire circle of friends.
One of them is Robert Johnson.
One of them is Robert Johnson. One of them is not me.
Yeah, the Kabbalistic expert, Robert Johnson? Or...
Yeah. Guy.
Oh my God! Sorry. Wow, that was a little intense. But the thing is, the Rosicrucian. The other interesting aspect of it is that it up out of Lutheran aspects to one which was this, diffusive charitable side, and then there was this almost political side during the Reformation, and then the Counter-Reformation right after that. So there's also this slight political side to it as well. And the big thing to note with Rosicrucianism is that there's actually a Masonic group of Rosicrucians, of Masonic Rosicrucians. In fact, there's a number of them. The Societas Rosicrucianis, or whatever it is, of whatever, some Latin. Rosicrucian Society of the United States. So,
Nick can brush up on his Latin.
Yeah, they didn't make me take that. I took French. That's where all the girls were. But
True story. That's why you should be in the Scottish Rite.
Hey, there we go. Oh man, but that's the thing about Rosicrucianism, is that it's still alive and breathing today. So.
Very true. All right, which leads us into the next one, which is Christian mysticism. It's kind of related and kind of different, and there are things like the Christian Kabbalah, where people had taken those inherently Jewish concepts of the Kabbalah and the Jewish mysticism and said, well, it also applies to a lot of the teachings of Jesus Christ, and so let's take some of those things, tweak it to fit our needs, and that's one style. And I know Jason had done some research on some of the other aspects. So, Jason.
Well, I was really interested in taking a look at Christian mysticism and what it really means. Christianity is something that's really important to me personally. And it was really interesting to, again, take a look at it in light of mysticism being something that's generally hidden, only known to a few, certain people. And as far as Christian mysticism is concerned, again, it is the idea of putting as much of your resources as you can toward truly knowing God. And there are 2 lines of thought, or 2 general trends when it comes to the study of Christian mysticism. It's the effort to know what God is not, which is called apophatic philosophy, and there's also the drive to know what God is, which is the cataphatic philosophy. Interesting because it focuses, in addition to knowing what God is and what God is not, the Christian mysticism focuses primarily on Jesus Christ, obviously, as the ultimate, form of God to try to emulate as humans, because Christ was fully God and fully man. Therefore, according to Christian mysticism or Christian mystics, as long as they can model their life after Christ as much as they can, that is their way that they can truly know God and who God is and who God is not. So in a sense, it's what it's perhaps a greater degree of what all Christians strive to do, which is to emulate Christ in everything you do.
Yeah.
That was something that was interesting to me.
And I'm still hearing that that Gnostic background behind all this. It's again trying to know and be one with your Creator, right? So that all that philosophy is very internalized, but it's still trying to focus just on your relationship with God. I think we have one more, spiritual alchemy. This is kind of fascinating to me, is reading some of the background on that. And what it does is it takes those Hermetic principles of being able to, again, apply philosophy, basically, and internalize those processes. So I'm sure it started out as the physical act of trying to transform lead into gold, right? It was a big thing in Egypt. It was a big thing in the Middle East. The word alchemy is a word that was based out of the Persian area, and so. But over time, people took this process, which we know evolved into chemistry, but took those steps as more of a system of how do you apply philosophy into your own life. And so while the initial goal was to transform real lead into gold, they actually took that concept and said, well, instead of taking a rough ashlar and making it a perfect ashlar, we're going to take our rude and lead state and try to remove our impurities through a process to get to a gold-like end state. And so it's kind of a neat parallel in the concept of taking, starting with rude and imperfect matter and going through a process of internalizing an evolution. They had this concept of this mystical substance called the Philosopher's Stone. That's where Harry Potter got it from. And it's this mystical substance that once you find it is the catalyst that will transform lead into gold. And so just like we're always trying to be better people, we're trying to find the next thing to improve ourselves. The Philosopher's Stone was a symbol of striving to emulate perfection, trying to improve yourself even further, because through that process you will transform yourself from lead into gold. And so it's kind of a neat parallel.
That's pretty cool.
If you really think about what we do in the process of taking good men and making them better, but applying that in an alchemical sense. And so it has some really neat, neat symbols to it and kind of neat processes. Tim Hogan has written a couple books on the alchemical process and how it applies to masonry. I haven't read those yet, but I've seen a couple of his videos, and it gives you something, again, to think about, whether or not you take it all at face value or if you just kind of internalize those concepts.
And also, I wanted to kind of add, there's another school to all of these things that we talked about, where, just like I was talking about the Zohar is interesting in the fact that it literally takes, so there's like these three schools of thought, right? There's the, I'm going to read this book and take every word literal. And then there is the school of thought that is, this book is written in allegory. But then there is another book that is kind of off to the side, and not a lot of people will open this book up, and that's kind of what the Zohar seems to be in some areas, where it's decoding the esoteric kind of allegory that's there and saying, but it's real scientific principle. For instance, in the Bible, Old Testament will say, and God created all things with the Word, right? And so there could be something there. If sound can destroy, it can create. So they bring these scientific like explanations to things that may be real. And so that's another area where they take these esoteric things and they're bringing them in. You know, like in the alchemy area that you were just talking about. Several things that I've read, esoteric papers talk about the alchemy, with the outcome being the apotheosis of man or something. Do you know what I mean?
Right, right.
The what is it? The applicability of all this, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's a made up word, but yeah, I'm
It's
gonna
okay.
use it because
I get it.
it sounds good.
It sounds esoteric. So really, we've gone over our time and kind of hitting the highlights. This is really just an introduction. It's things that we've stumbled upon along the way. We've talked amongst ourselves, like, you know, I dabble in this, dabble in that.
I dabble.
As with all these things, right? These take lifetimes to even get a base understanding of the philosophies behind there. But what I think is really fascinating with the internet age that we live in today, that a lot of those books, like the Zohar, like Fama Fraternatus, and like all these other texts that are out, they're available right now just with a quick Google search. And so these books that, you know, you had to find pressed, and they were only given to certain people, and they were a physical thing that got lost to the age of time, they've now been scanned and are available just at a couple keystrokes away. And so, are they really esoteric anymore?
Great question.
I would say the physical representation of the knowledge is there, and it's accessible to all. But it's the opening and scrutinizing that's what makes it esoteric.
Yeah. Who do you know that's actually, like I said, walking the walk, talking the talk? Who do you know is actually going to open that book and go, I'm doing this, getting rid of everything. I'm going to live my life this way. So I think the esoteric value is still there.
For all of our viewers
Go ahead,
out there,
Nick.
I do have a secret group that's filled with esoteric stuff, and I'll let you in on it for a very low price of $90,000.
Well, I gotta get me some of that.
Isn't that what you owe your bookie?
Rizzo? No.
That's
It's
a
great.
coincidence. That's a coincidence.
You know, bringing it back to esotericism and, you know, the fact that all of these things are widely available, I agree completely with Robert that, you know, the sheer few people on the earth today who actually put it into practice. It's kind of the practice without the pragmatism. You know, we're all practical guys here. You know, we could try to put some of these ideals into practice, and I think, you know, anybody can with Masonry, because Masonry is a system of morality. These are all practices that teach morality, knowing God. It's easy to link the two up if you'd like to, but we're pragmatic about it. We're not going to drop everything, sell off all of our possessions, and go move to Zimbabwe.
Right.
So, but the people who do, you know, those are the true, you know, mystics of our age, and they're the true esoterics of our age. And I think there's a place for that in the world today, and I think my place is nowhere near that.
So on that note, Jason, why don't you bring us home? We'll start to wrap up.
Okay. Well, you know, one of the reasons we did this was because there are a lot of people out there, especially younger Freemasons today, who are very interested in mystical ties to Masonry. But a lot of what we've heard is that people don't really know where to start. And so that is why we did this today, just to give everyone an overview to say, if you're interested, and you don't have to be, then here are a couple places to start. Here are ways that you can start having discussions and promoting dialogue on these things to your heart's content. That said, I'm going to say that I still fall on the side of the fence that I love the history, and I love the empiricism, and frankly, I could take or leave the mysticism, and frankly, I prefer to leave it. But you know, that being said, there's room in Masonry to study both, and it's all up to you as far as what you want to get out of the fraternity.
Very cool.
I had another thing to that, or another part of that thought, but it has since escaped me. So I'm going to say thanks for watching, and you know, keep commenting, keep liking our Facebook page. keep letting us know what you're interested in hearing us talk about, and rate our podcast. We're on iTunes. And with that, I will send it back to Robert Johnson.
All right, RJ.
Oh, geez. Just to say, I fall on both sides. I really do have a genuine interest in the esoteric, as well as the empirical side there. In fact, my first lectures I ever did in the lodge were of the empirical nature, and like Jason said, if you want to study all this kind of thing, you can go as deep as you want to go. Some of it is super, super difficult to understand, so if you don't get it right away, don't give up. Talk to somebody about it. Somebody will have a really cool opinion on it. Don't go try to read Morals and Dogma straight through, because there are guys out there that can do it, but I'm going to bet 99% of us just can't do that. It's a difficult book. It's a different read. But I hope you guys all found some of this stuff interesting, and it fuels your Masonic fire, and you go out and you study all that you want to study, and you get it going on. So thanks for watching. I'll be posting more episodes up to the iTunes podcast version of this. Still have to put up episode 9 through 15, so be looking out for those.
Great, thanks. Nick?
Hey, well, this is what I gotta say to everybody. I'm a neophyte when it comes to this esoteric stuff. I love reading it, but because I have this short attention span, I'll like read the book, then I'll be like, ooh, this one's about snakes, and so I'll just move on to that one. So it's like, but honestly, there's so much information out there. Just keep reading. One day it will all click. All the pieces will come together. It's starting to for me. For a long time, it took me a while to figure out what Hermeticism even meant and how it related to everything else. I think I found kind of the connector through reading about Sufism and kind of understanding that, and that I found out because, and this is how my brain works, I found that because I was reading some poems by Robert Bly, and so I had these Bly poems of him doing Persian verse, and then it got me into reading about Sufism, and then everything started to click together. So really, you know what, just keep reading, it will all connect at some point. You'll probably be 95, but it'll be there, and you'll feel really good about yourself.
Yeah, it will either all connect or you'll pass on and it won't matter.
Exactly. You'll be one with God. Nick Johnson, you can find my blog at millennialfreemason.com. I'm also a mod on the Freemasonry subreddit, which you can find at reddit.com/r/freemasonry.
Great.
Thanks.
All right,
I'll pass
Juan.
it off.
All right. Well, for the younger or newest Freemasons out there, or the people that are just interested in Freemasonry, you don't have to study any of these different philosophies, and you don't really have to get into the esotericism of Freemasonry. There are some people out there that's not what they're looking for when they join Freemasonry. They're looking for something else. I see thumbs up. And I have heard from Masons who have been turned off to the point of not going to lodge anymore because their particular lodge focuses too heavily on esotericism. Not in this country, I might add.
Really?
So, it's up to you. If you are interested, know that within Freemasonry there are a great variety of brothers that can help you get started, go in the right direction. But whether you pick one philosophy to study or another, if you don't, if you just try to prove whether one is the correct one or another, then you're missing the point.
Right.
It's try to find out what gems are within it that apply to your life, are going to give you, your family, and your community a better quality of life, and then focus on that, and and then you can teach us what it's all about. You can hear a little bit more from me by visiting thewindingstairs.com, and if you liked this this presentation. If you're on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and comment with your opinions below. If you're listening to it as a podcast, audio podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It helps other Masons out there find this information easier. So thank you again for listening.
Great. So I guess as for my final thoughts, that all of this is great on paper, but until you internalize it and try to apply it to your own life, it really doesn't matter. So you can read all about how these things came to be, or study the empirical side of it, right? That so and so wrote this book and it was influenced by this. But if you don't stop to think about it, it's really not going to do you much good. So when you're going through, as little bit as you pick up, because again, you're not going to get it all overnight, but as you start picking up bits and pieces, think about how this applies. And for me personally, all this stuff has really supported my Christian faith, and that it's really been a neat experience to say, to look at kind of the as I say, the cube from another side, just to see how I was raised, but then how this can apply both in a moral, ethical, philosophical side. So to learn, internalize, and if you're not finding it, I'm hearing about where a lot of the younger Masons joining today are looking for more of this, and they're not getting all of it from their lodges. And so, I mean, Chris Hodap said that in a recent presentation he gave at our lodge last year, and that if you don't find it at your lodge or in your district, go find it. We're here on the internet to guide those paths. So it's out there. You'll find someone who's willing to help you. But just don't go ahead and demit because you're not finding what you're looking for. Also, to that point, be the change you wish to be in the world. And if you know something and you want to share it, and see who reacts, see who comments. We've done things like in my mother lodge, we have a beehive club, and it's just basically a study group that we get together and talk about different issues, both philosophical, empirical, all the above, and it's a great way to extend the lodge experience. And so I encourage everyone to do that, or something to that effect. With that, thanks for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.